اهلا بيكم وحلقه جديده وضيف جديد وخلينا نتكلم كوره برعايه اتش سبورتس جروب. وضيفنا النهارده هو اسطوره بمعنى الكلمه. هو بيقولوا بالعاميه كده الدراع اليمين للسير أليكس فيرغسون في الجيل الذهبي لمانشستر يونايتد، وطبعا اللي كان بيضم عمالقه بحجم ريو فيرديناند، روي كين، فيرنست روي، رايان جيجز، بول سكولز، والقايمه الطول وين روني. طبعا هو بنشوف كريستيانو رونالدو لما بيطلع في الانترفيو بيقول السبب اللي هو وصل للشكل البدني القوي الرهيب اللي هو وصله دلوقتي بيرجع الفضل للراجل اللي معانا النهارده، هو مايكل كليج او مايك كليج. بنرحب بيه النهارده. Mike, how are you today?
Fine. How are you?
Great, thank you very much. So we've got a few questions for you. So first of all, tell us how you started.
Okay, I started in coaching when I was 20, and I used to play guitar, and I realized my arms were as skinny as my guitar strings. So I went to the gym and started training, and within 3 months I'd done really well, not at being big and strong, but understanding what I was doing, and people were asking me to coach them rather than the guy owning the gym. So he asked me, can I work there? So I did that for a few years. Now, as I was doing that, my eldest son, Michael, was growing up, and he wanted to he liked doing karate and taekwondo and stuff like that. So I helped him with that, getting stronger and more agile as a young kid. And then he started playing football. And then my other son, he ended up getting into training, so I started working with him. And then what happens is, over a period of time, their friends wanted to train because they saw that they were getting better. So I started training their friends as well, and I opened up a gym. And then the schools realized that the kids were coming to school and doing better than the other kids at school, so they asked me into the school to start coaching all the kids at school. And then I went on to college, coaching in colleges, and then ultimately, because 4 of my sons now, 2 played for Manchester United as footballers, and 2 were in the Worlds and the Europeans, etc., in weightlifting. So from that, United watched my work, and when they moved from Salford, from the Cliff, they opened the gym. They opened up the training centre in Carrington, and they asked me to work in the gym full time. And I started off with their youth players. Well, then very quickly I was asked to work with the first team players, and that's virtually the history of it, really.
Thank you very much. دلوقتي سألناه بنقول له انت ازاي بديت مشوارك، فبيقول هو بدأ وهو عنده 20 سنة كان بيعزف جيتار او كان بيحب يتمرن على الجيتار. بعدين مايكل ابنه الكبير كان بيحب يلعب كاراتيه. بعدين ابنه الثاني واصحابه بعد كده لما شافوا القوة اللي ابنه بقى فيها طبعا كلهم طلبوا منه ان هم يعملوا نفس الموضوع ده، انضموا ليهم. المدرسة لاحظت ان الاولاد دول مختلفين بدنيا عن التانيين. بعدين بدأ يدرس في الجامعة، الكلام ده بدأ يشتغل في الجامعة. بعدين مانشستر يونايتد لما نقلوا مقر التدريب بتاعهم طلبوا منه ان هو ينضم ليهم، ومسك الجيم، وبعدين مسك الناشئين، بعدين مسك الفريق الاول. وطبعا القصة بقيتها هنرجع لها تاني، او كلكم طبعا عارفينها، شغله مع سير أليكس فيرغسون والكلام ده. Alright, was Ronaldo the best athlete you have ever trained or you have ever worked with? I mean, especially he's still performing now, like he's in his 20s.
Yes, he is the best athlete I've ever worked with. He came along with the right attitude. He was the hardest working, and if you mix talent with hard work, you're going to get some force to work with. And that's what he proved over a period of time, that he was the hardest. He would work the hardest, and he had a lot of talent, and we was able to utilize that, manipulate it, excite it, and he wanted to be the best player in the world in the beginning. That's what he said his aim was. And he did everything with everybody at United to make sure he had the proper apprenticeship, if you like, at Manchester United before he moved on to Real Madrid.
Perfect. So سألناه دلوقتي بنقول له هل كريستيانو رونالدو كان أفضل رياضي أنت دربته قبل كده؟ هقول نعم، هو طبعا بالطبع أفضل رياضي دربته. هو كان موهوب، هو جه عنده أصلا موهبة، بيتمرن كتير جدا، بيقول ما بيزهقش من التمرين. وهو قال له قبل كده أنا عايز أتمرن عشان أبقى أحسن لاعب في العالم. وطبعا احنا كلنا شايفين النتيجة لكريستيانو عليها. We have worked closely with Sir Alex Ferguson and the class of 92. What was so special about this period and about Ferguson himself?
Okay, Alex Ferguson is a very unique character. And what I learned from Alex Ferguson I was watching him prior to going to United because Michael and Steve were with us. was there. But obviously, over the years as I worked there, Alex Ferguson was the ultimate in observers. He knows how to observe people. He picks things out from people. I mean, when I was at Carrington, his office was in the corner of the building, and all the cars that the players came in, and he could see them. So he saw them getting out of the cars, what mood they was in the morning, whether they're coming in with the earphones on, listening to music, or falling out with the wife on the phone or whatever. He would observe that. And then he would observe them going out onto the football pitch for training. He would observe whether they went out in groups or singular. So he gets to know each person, how they work into their training routines. Then he would just wander around. He always had his coaches doing the coaching, the training. He didn't do that himself. You know, so he used to go watching what the players are like and seeing their interaction with other players. Then ultimately he selected his team, which, if you remember back in the day, everybody disagreed with the team that Sir Alex Ferguson he was putting out. Well, he ultimately ended up winning the games because he's there with them all the time. He's observing all the time. But the guy was obsessed with football, totally obsessed. I believe, I don't know if it's true, but he had 6 screens up in his front room, watching 6 different games at the same time, I believe. And I did challenge him on that, but he wouldn't admit it. One or the because I trained Alex himself. You know, he was a really good lad. He used to love doing the boxing and stuff like that, even at his age. So he was very dedicated to his job. And his main aspect was observation, and then knowing how to blend the people at the right moment in time with other people at the right moment in time to get the best effect. And that's what he did with the youngsters as they was coming through. He didn't train them. He had coaches to train them. And then you have no pressure to put the coaching session on. You have all the time to observe, see how they function. And then he would see them in the canteen. He would see them going home. And so he mastered observation, understanding, and collective development.
سألناه دلوقتي هو اشتغل كان إدراع اليمين لأليكس فيرغسون. سير أليكس فيرغسون طبعا والجيل الذهبي لمانشستر يونايتد. قلنا له ايه كان المختلف فيهم يعني. فبيقول الراجل ده كان مختلف تماما، راجل يونيك جدا، راجل بيقدر يشوف ويحلل كل حاجه، كان بيلاحظ كل حاجه من مكتبه، كان عنده مكتب في الكورنر بيشوف بيه الملعب، وحتى من اول الكار بارك بتاعه اللعيبه بيشوف بينزلوا ازاي، الاتيتيود بتاعهم او يعني التصرفات بتاعتهم، بيشوف المزيكا اللي بيسمعوها، لغايه من كل التصرفات بتاعتهم لغايه ما بينزلوا الملعب. هو كان طبعا عنده مدربين بيدربوا، هو بيحط الخطط والمدربين بيشتغلوا عليها، ولكن هو بيقف بره ويتفرج. بيقول كان في ماتشات كتيره بيحط تشكيل غريب الناس بتنتقده فيه، وفي الاخر هو بيكسب، لان هو اللي عايش مع اللعيبه وهو اللي عارف مين اللي جاهز ومين اللي مش جاهز. بيشوفهم في الكانتين بيعملوا ايه. بيقول الراجل مجنون بالكوره لدرجه انه عنده في المكتب بتاعه 6 شاشات بيتفرج عليهم على ماتشات في نفس الوقت يعني. So another question, how did Sir Alex Ferguson manage a variety of stars at the same time, like having to put some on the bench?
With an iron rod. Simple as that. He was the gaffer. That's what we called him, the gaffer. What he said, we did. It's as simple as that. And it worked right the way through the club.
Thank you. سألناه دلوقتي بنقول له ازاي يعني سير أليكس فيرغسون كان عنده مجموعة النجوم الرهيبة، كان عنده مليارات على أرض الملعب، ازاي كان بيضطر ان هو احيانا يحط لعيبة على البنش او كده، او يقعدوا مع الدكة يعني. فبيقول بمنتهى السهولة الراجل كان اللي بيقوله هو اللي بيحصل. يعني شخصيته قوية جدا، ما فيش حد يقدر يتدخل، واللي بيزعل الباب بيفوت جمل زي ما بيقولوا يعني. Can you tell us briefly about Seed of Speed?
Yeah, Seed of Speed was a term coined from years and years research and observation about speed. You see, I was not a football coach. I decided in England you don't want to be outside in the cold and rain. You're better off being in the gym, you know, working on stuff in there. You see, so I didn't work on the skills of football. So I looked at the skill of speed. Developing speed is a skill, and it's much more difficult than strength or power or anything like that. It's really a deep issue. It's a deep journey. And I realized that there is a seed within the brain where speed comes out of. And that's why I coined the term Seed of Speed for being my work, because I looked into the brain and looked into the physical, into the mental, and even into the spiritual about how is the best way that we can get speed into athletes, whether it's going forward, upwards, sideways, whatever. Speed is special. It's a skill to be developed.
Thank you very much. سألناه بنقول له دلوقتي يشرح لنا عن سيد اوف سبيد. سيد اوف سبيد هي البراند بتاعته او الحاجه اللي هو اخترعها مع شغل مع مانشستر يونايتد، وهو بيقول دي خلاصه سنوات من الابحاث، لان هو اشتغل على السرعه كمهاره منفرده، لان هو لاحظ ان في جزء من العقل بيتحكم في السرعه، وهو اشتغل على الموضوع ده بغض النظر عن السرعه عن القوه والمهاره والحاجات الثانيه، اشتغل على السرعه بس، على الجزء اللي في العقل اللي بيتحكم في المهاره. بيقول ان هو قدر يطوره وان هو يشتغل على اللعيب كحاجه بس عشان يزود سرعته، ودي حاجه طبعا مش موجوده كتيره في العالم. It is well known that the lighter player, the more agility they go. Like we see lots of players, they try to work really hard on their body just to get, gain more muscle, and then they lose their agility. But we saw a player like Adama Traore or Cristiano Ronaldo, I would say, they're doing really well with the dribble. Adama Traore, he plays for Wolverhampton. So how can you explain that?
Well, I can explain it, but he's obviously, worked on his body, but he's worked on the skills, and he's developed the two together. But it's very unusual. He's an exception to the rule. It's certainly something I would not recommend that young players try to put a lot of muscle on. They really want to develop skill as the priority, speed as the second most prioritized, and then after that, you've got loads of things. You've got strength, power, brain cognition, endurance capacity, all these things. But they all have to be worked together. If you isolate strength, say, which is what you're alluding to, that he's a big, strong, powerful lad, well, I think most players would break down from doing that, and they would never become the player that they should be, because there's so many different things you've got to work on. He's obviously a special guy, and he's very unusual, but he was certainly not the way that I would train people under normal circumstances.
سألناه دلوقتي بنقول له ان احنا اللعيب الخفيف في الحركه بيبقى دايما هو اللعيب المهاري، ولما اللعيبه بتحاول تحط عضلات على جسمها او يوصلوا للشكل زي اداما ترايوري مثلا، اللي هو كسب، هو عمل الريكورد بتاع ايضا ان هو 180 مراوغه السنه دي في الدوري الانجليزي. كريستيانو رونالدو طبعا. فبيقول الناس دي مختلفه، هم اشتغلوا على المهاره وعلى الجسم في نفس الوقت، ولكن ده حاجه اكسبشن او حاجه، دي مش القاعده، ده اختلاف، دول بيبقوا ناس محددين. هو ما ينصحش اي حد انه يحاول يعمل الكلام ده، لان اللي بيحاول يشتغل على جسمه ده ممكن هيأثر كتير جدا على مهارته الطبيعيه. في جسم قوي بالفطره وفي جسم مش قوي بالفطره، فبيقول لازم نحاول نفصل بين يشتغل على المهاره اكتر حاجه وبعدين الباقي بيجي. During the warm up we need to start do we need to start from the top to the bottom, or from the bottom to the other way around? Do we need to cover every area?
There's only one place that you start warming up, and that's the heart. Okay, so we need to get the heart going so that then you circulate the blood around the system. Okay, so the best way to do that, if you're in a gym, you're looking at cross trainer, bike and rower. There's no pounding on the joints, but you're getting the heart circulating around the system. Even for stretching should be done after getting the heart rate up. Okay, because what you're trying to do is direct the blood into the area that you want to stretch. Now, there's a famous book that says the life is in the blood. If you look for that, the life is in the blood. And if you don't get the blood into the right areas, then it's not going to have the right job, because it's got to be there, to function properly. Okay? So that's the thing. So we get the heart rate up, the circulatory system going. When you're doing that, you get the lungs going, so you're pumping oxygen in and getting rid of the other stuff. And that's the way to start. Now, obviously, if somebody is outside in the rain, the worst thing you can do is any type of static stretching. So if you're in a hot country with, it's dry, then static stretching's fine. But activation is more important to me than stretching. That's how I've seen it over the years. Your static stretching, that sort of stuff, you can go into yoga and them sort of things. They're great, but it's an after performance thing to do. It's not before. Okay, you've got to be very, very careful on that. You can spend a lot of time and waste time and energy by doing things that are not relevant.
سألنا دلوقتي عن في التسخين، هل الإطالات بتتعمل قبل أو بعد، من فوق ولا من تحت، ولا إيه الموضوع بالظبط، ولا في وسط الجري ولا بعد التمرين؟ هو بيقول أهم حاجة إن إحنا نبدأ بالقلب. بيقول إن الدم لو ما بيوصلش للجسم للعضلات، يبقى أنت كل اللي بتعمله ده أنت بتضيع وقتك، إن أنت بتعملها من الثبات، الإطالات من الثبات، ده تضييع للوقت. لو أنت مش في بلد سخنة أو لو أنت جسمك مش سخن، العضلات مش هتتقبل الكلام ده. إنما في البلاد الحر ما فيش مشاكل، ولكن هو بيفضل بيقول انت لو في الجيم ابدأ مثلا بالعجلة البايك عشان توصل ان الدم يبدأ قلبك يضخ الدم يوصل للعضلات كلها فتقدر تستفاد بالتمرين. بيقول دي حاجة تانية، ما تضيعش وقتك لو انت في مطر او في برد، ما ينفعش الاطالات مش هتفيدك بأي شيء لان ما فيش دم واصل كفاية للعضلات. What is the right, that's simple, you know, there's lots of people ask this question, what is the right age to start and work physically for youth players? And how often, you know, like they can, when they can start to use the gym, at what age exactly and how?
Well, the problem is that it's very broad, and it depends where you're at. You see, my youngest son, who did weightlifting, started when he was 13 months old. He had his nappy on doing weightlifting. Okay, now people go, whoa. Now, he wasn't lifting 150 kilos at the time. You understand? Yeah. Let's draw it all back. Let's go to how the body works, how it moves. And as you see the body develop, then you need to do the physical, you need to do the skill and blend the two together, because it's all directed by the brain. So we've got to give skill exercises if we want a player to be more skillful, which we do for footballers. We need for him to be physical, so we have to do physical exercises. Now, of course, you wouldn't have him lifting heavy weights or, you know, punching bags too hard or climbing and falling and all. Everything's got to be done at the right level at the right time. Gyms can be open to anybody if they've got the right person actually coaching them, but the gym can be the worst place in the world if you haven't. So, you know, it's something that needs to be really looked at, you know, on a broad sense, information for that.
سألنا دلوقتي سؤال مهم جدا، كل الناس عايزين يعرفوا ايه السن المناسب اللي ممكن نبدأ بيه تمرين اللياقة البدنية او الجيم بالنسبة للأطفال. فهو بيقول الموضوع ده طبعا هيختلف من واحد لواحد، يعني بيقول هو ابنه وهو عنده 13 سنة كان بيدخل الجيم، يعني هو لسه عامل البامبرز زي ما بيقولوا ولكن ده بيقول طبعا ما كانش بيشيل وزن ولا حاجة. وبيقول في ناس تانيين بيبدأوا في سن مختلفة. بيقول الموضوع كله لازم الجيم ممكن يكون مفيد جدا لو انت بتتمرن مع شخص بيعرف يمرنك من وانت صغير، او ممكن يكون مضر جدا وممكن يدمر حياتك لو الشخص اللي معاك مش فاهم، لان الموضوع معقد اكتر من ان هو يتشرح بس في نقول من 5 سنين او 7 سنين. ما ينفعش يتشرح بالطريقه دي، لازم يكون شخص فاهم بيطبق معاك الكلام ده في الجيم عشان يفيدك ما يضركش. Alright, during the lockdown, can we plan for a week, for example, to work for strength, cardio, agility, footwork, power and speed, and how long each session should be? Can we combine some of them together, or there's going to be conflict?
There doesn't need to be conflict, because most things can be done. Like in my gym, if I did a video for you in my gym, you would find out that there's football going on, there's strength going on, there's power going on, there's cognitive processing going on, stretching, flexibility, bodybuilding, the whole lot. But what you won't find in my gym, you won't find any mirrors. You won't find any music. You won't find any £1 million televisions for people to watch, because the most important thing when you're training is the brain. And the brain needs to be focused on what you're hoping to achieve. And so you have to do all these things by thinking about them, concentrating on them. And most people are thinking about other things. I see people training with earphones on and training while they're watching the television. Well, I'm afraid that will never give what it's supposed to give. You've got to train all the things as near to each other as you can. And without any interruption through various types of things that shouldn't be there.
سألناه بنقوله دلوقتي في خلال اللوك داون او الحظر اللي موجود والناس بتتمرن في البيت، ازاي نقدر نمرن كل الحاجات دي، يعني اللي مثلا سترينث وكارديو والاجيليتي، اللياقه والمهاره والسرعه كل الكلام ده، ازاي نشتغل عليه في نفس الوقت، وهل ده ممكن يحصل يعمل كونفليكت او ممكن يحصل ان هم يعني يضايقوا بعض يعني. فبيقول لا طبعا اشتغل زي ما انت عايز، اهم حاجه هو العقل وانت بتتمرن ان انت ما تكونش متشتت باي حاجه تانية. يعني بيقول انت لو ممكن يصور لك في الجيم بتاعه مفيش مرايات، مفيش تلفزيون، مفيش مزيكا، مفيش، لازم تركز في التمرين، تتمرن على قد ما تقدر. كل الحاجات ممكن تتمرن عليها، كل الحاجات في نفس اليوم، مفيش ادنى مشكله، وكل يوم. وبيقول دي طالما انت ذهنك صافي ومركز في اللي بتعمله ده مفيش ادنى مشكله خالص. If a player is working the lower muscles to build strength and the same time is to training for speed and power, is that too much, or that's probably pretty much what we just said now?
Exactly. You've got to be doing all these things together. I mean, these people are specializing in gyms doing what weightlifters do. So the actual, to get strength or power, they're specializing as a weightlifter does. I've never seen weightlifters playing football in the gym. I've never seen footballers doing weightlifting on the pitch. It's ludicrous what they're doing. You've got to look at the body, how it moves, and give it more strength, give it more power, give it more speed, but over a period of time, along with skill. And if you just use a weightlifter's weightlifting program to develop strength or power for football, you're on the wrong track by a long shot.
Perfect. بنقوله دلوقتي ان احنا ممكن نمرن الجزء السفلي من الجسم يعني الرجل وكده، في نفس الوقت احنا بنعمل تمارين تانية للباور سبيد. فهو بيقول ممكن تتمرن، ولكن خليك وانت في الجيم اتمرن الحاجات اللي في الجيم، وانت في الملعب اتمرن الحاجات اللي في الملعب. لو انت بتمزج الحاجتين، يعني انت في الملعب وبتشتغل على القوة او الكلام ده كله، او في الجيم بتتمرن كورة، بيقول انت كده يعني بتشتت نفسك وانت بتشتغل على حاجة مش واقعية ابدا. فيا ريت الاختصاص يعني اللي هنا لازم بيقولك المدرب مهم جدا، لازم يبقى عارف هو بيعمل ايه والبرنامج بتاعه يكون واضح جدا. Abs, you know, abs is a headache for lots of people. So some said, shall I train my abs every day? And is that 15 minutes enough for abs, for example, exercises?
You've got to look at what time you've got available to be able to do all the types of training you've got. And you must have a bit of time for your midsection core or whatever you want to call it. It's very, very important. And to get varied types of exercise to make sure you're hitting all aspects of your movement during football. So you should probably spend about 5% of the time on your core midsection. You never do it every day, especially if you've not done much in the beginning. You build it up. But I got to the point with the players, especially the people like Cristiano, etc. They wanted to do them every day because they really felt as though that I was helping them so much. So with that in mind, you've got to build them up to make sure they weren't doing too much to the point when they was getting the full benefit, but without overdoing it, because you can overdo it. And one of the days you should never do midsection of core is the day before a game, because it's very easy just to tweak a tiny muscle inside there, and then you end up with pains out on the football pitch and you can have a breakdown, and then you're in serious trouble with your manager, or I would be as a coach for having let him do it. So there's got to be a little bit of common sense.
سألنا دلوقتي بالنسبة لعضلات البطن أو الأبس، هي المفروض تتمرن كل يوم لمدة مثلا 15 دقيقة بيبقى كفاية ولا إيه؟ فهو بيقول أنت حسب الوقت اللي عندك أو حسب الوقت أنت مخصصه للتمرين، فاتمرن على كل حاجة واديهم 5% من وقت التمرين بتاعك. يعني لو بتمرن ساعة شوف 5% بقد ايه، لو بتمرن ساعتين شوف 5% بقد ايه بالنسبة لهم. وبيقول هو بيرجح ان هي مش كل يوم، ولكن طبعا بيختلف شخص لآخر. شفنا كريستيانو رونالدو مثلا بيقول هو كان مهتم جدا بالموضوع ده لان حس انها بتساعده. انت لو حسيت ان ده فعلا بيفرق معاك وبيساعدك، او لو حسيتي ان ده بيفرق معاك وبيساعدك، اتمرني عليها وشوفي. وطبعا انت بتحسي اكتر بجسمك او انت بتحس اكتر بجسمك، ولكن في نفس الوقت يعني ما تعملهاش قبل اليوم بتاع الماتش، لان ده ممكن يحطك في مشكلة كبيرة. لو عملتها زيادة شوية ممكن تتعور او توصل لإجهاد، والمدرب هيبقى في مشكلة يعني. How can I build a relationship between my brain and my muscle so whatever I do in the gym I can still use it on the football pitch?
Well, you've got to be looking at exercises that actually emulate what you're going to do on the football pitch. You know what I mean? You've got to be thinking football whilst you're doing these exercises. Just for an example, you know the lateral raise exercise, you know, with dumbbells. Well, what we're doing that exercise for is to be able to hold people off. You know, so you can think in terms of, right, when I'm doing this exercise, then I'm going to be thinking about somebody trying to get that ball off me while I'm doing the exercise. Then, of course, you can step that up by not just doing the lateral raise exercise on its own. You can be doing some kind of step down balancing exercise as you're doing that, because you're actually always on one foot. Somebody's trying to get the ball off you. You're trying to control the ball. So then, you know, you're balancing and you're also doing the lateral raise, working on your strength. That's the way you've got to be looking at it. Obviously, there's loads of different types of things you can do. Far too much for me to go in right now, but there's an example of how you do it.
Thank you. سألنا دلوقتي ازاي تعمل علاقة بين عقلك وعضلاتك، ازاي الحاجات اللي انت بتطبقها في الجيم تقدر تطبقها في الملعب. فهو بيقول الموضوع ده لازم تشتغل على حاجات مرتبطة، يعني انت حاجات بتعملها، يعني مثلا انت بتشيل حديد والكلام ده ملوش علاقة طبعا بالملعب، انما انت تعمل حاجات البالانس. يعني انت لو لعيب جاي عليك مثلا وانت عايز توقفه او انت عايز تمر، فاشتغل على حاجات البالانس في الجيم. ده ممكن تشتغل بالاوزان وانت بتعمل الحاجات دي عشان تربطهم ببعض. هو بيقول طبعا الموضوع ده عميق جدا ممكن يتكلم فيه كتير، ولكن للاسف الوقت ما يسمحش. Okay, it's a very good question about the last week of the pre-season. You know, you usually in the pre-season you start, you go up, and then you try to slow down, or the other way around. Like what happened in the last week to go fresh into the league?
Well, yeah, you've got to ease off a little bit of your, your power, your speed, your strength, your endurance capacity, because it's got to be more focused on football. You know what I mean? So we early doors, you'll use a lot more gym training, and you build yourself up, but more and more then you're beginning to put the football into it. But you should always have football in the beginning and always have the main football at the end, whereas everything else is secondary. So unless you get that football in there, then everything else can just break down.
سألناه دلوقتي بنقول له في آخر أسبوع في فترة الإعداد المفروض هل إحنا بننزل بالحمل ولا إيه اللي بيجرى بالظبط؟ فهو بيقول إحنا طبعا في البداية بنبدأ بالجيم، ولازم طبعا يبقى معاه كورة، ولكن بعد كده بنبدأ ننسى الجيم شوية وبعدين بنركز على الكورة، وبعد كده الحاجات التانية بتبقى هي الثانوية. يعني إحنا بنبدأ دلوقتي بالجيم وبعدين في الآخر بنبدأ ننزل بالحمل. إحنا بنلعب كورة، يعني أنت خلاص بتلعب كورة كتير، وده بالنسبة له يعني عضلاتك بتتقبل الموضوع ده. مفيش نزول قوي بالحمل، ولكن لان انت عايز توصل للدوري وانت في قمه مستواك. So another question was about, is that the same for right before the games, like every game? Like do we drop the load, do we go down before the game, or what do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you should always drop the load before the game. You've got to have the body ready to go and play. If you've overworked the body in any way that's going to affect the performance, then it's wrong. You've got to get your main hard sessions during the week in between, the biggest time in between the games. That's when your hard work comes on. Then you tailor it all off.
Okay. سألناه برضو بالنسبة هل فترات يعني اللي قبل الماتشات هل بننزل بالحمل ولا ايه الموضوع بالظبط؟ هو بيقول طبعا لازم تنزل بالحمل عشان تبقى يعني جسمك مستعد للموضوع ده. بيقول تخلي الحاجات اللي فيها أحمال كبيرة تخليها في وسط الأسبوع وانت مش مرتبط بأي حاجة عشان الإرهاق مش هيفرق معاك، انما قبل الماتشات لازم تنزل بالحمل جامد عشان تبقى مستعد للماتش وتعمل أحسن performance. In football, not many players practice yoga. How important do you think yoga is to maintaining flexibility in football and other sports?
Well, I think yoga is a good flexibility training exercise, done in the right manner because there's a lot of thoughtfulness with it. It's not the only way to stretch. There's lots of different types of stretching that can be utilized. But if you've got a good yoga coach who isn't thinking in terms of you becoming a yogi, because that happens, I'm afraid, we've had them at United, you bring them in to get more flexibility, etc. But then it's about, you've got to have your legs this way, legs that way. Well, everybody moves differently out on the football pitch, and so you've got to really think about what each individual his needs are. I mean, the big example to me was David Beckham. The way he ran and the way he kicked the ball. We had a yoga teacher come in and said, we've got to change all that. I said, I don't think the gaffer will be well happy with that, you know what I mean? So, yeah. So they are good, but there's lots of different types of stretching that's good.
Thank you. سألناه دلوقتي بنقول له هل اليوجا مهمة للجسم عشان يعني تخلي الفلكسبيليتي بتاعة الجسم بالنسبة للكورة أو أي رياضة عموما. هو بيقول اليوجا مهمة جدا عشان الاسترتش طبعا، ولكن هي مش الحاجة الوحيدة. وبيقول أكبر مثال على كده هو ديفيد بيكهام مثلا، لما اشتغل معاه كان الطريقة اللي بيجري بيها أو الطريقة اللي بيشوط بيها الكورة كان محتاج يوجا كتير جدا عشان يعني الطريقة يعني جسمه وطريقة جسمه ما كانتش مناسبة للرياضة اللي هو بيعملها، ولكن اشتغل كتير على اليوجا ووصل اللي هو بقى فيه ده. Lots of young players have problems with the back of their heel. I think it's the growing thing. Any suggestion about that, or why it's coming?
Yeah, they're all overuse injuries. A lot of lads, they want to play, they'll play for hours and hours on end. And of course, the body has a breakdown point. So once you start feeling any pain, kids should always tell parents or the coach or whatever that it's there. And the parents and the coach should make sure that if they're talking about these pains, that they ease it back. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to have a really bad strain. It happens all the time. Now, the other thing is some lads are very lazy. They don't do much training. They don't do much exercise. And then suddenly they want to get in a game and give it everything they've got, which is, great for them. But they end up with an injury because of it. So sometimes it's too excessive the amount, and other times you haven't trained enough so that when you do put maximum effort in, your body's not capable of coping.
That's right.
So there has to be a balance.
سألنا دلوقتي عن إصابات الكعب اللي هي بتتكرر بالنسبة للأطفال، يعني بيحسوا بألم في الكعب وكده، فإيه المشكلة؟ هو بيقول دي حاجة معروفة جدا بالنسبة للأطفال، لأن هم مش فاهمين، بينزلوا يلعبوا ساعات كتير من غير تمرين، وبعدين طبعا بيبقى حمل زايد في نفس الوقت، ولازم على طول ان هو اول ما يحس بالم لازم يقول للمدرب او لولي امره الموضوع ده. وبيقول المشكله ان في اطفال كتير بيبقوا زي ليزي او بيبقوا كسلانين شويه، ما بيتمرنوش كفايه، وبعدين بينزلوا في الماتش بيحطوا كل حاجه موجوده عندهم، وده طبعا بيحمل، وبيقول لو ما تعالجتش في وقتها دي ممكن تعمل لك مشاكل كتيره جدا في المستقبل. What's the best way to recover after each session or game? I mean, there's any particular exercise you suggest or just?
Well, I mean, we did go into that before. The best exercise is to go and relax. You know, is to have good food and good drink with good company, and then to sleep. You know, the next day you can do some light exercise. I mean, some of the main exercises you should be doing is like cross-trainer, bike and rower, because there's no pounding on the joints, but you're circulating the blood around. Because you want to get rid of all that stuff that's built up in the game out of your system as quickly as possible. So some people do a bit of swimming, stuff like that, you know, because it feels nice and relaxed in the pool. So you don't do any excessive types of training at all. Sorry, I do apologize.
That's right, sir.
You don't do anything excessive, and try and enjoy your life. I mean, a lot of players are so intent on becoming good players, they forget that you can actually enjoy your life as well. I mean, one of the things about Cristiano, when he was younger, he had a chef at his house. And he also used to go to nice restaurants with nice people. So he had always a lot of time needs to be spent actually sat eating and talking. That helps the body relax, but you're giving the nutrients to rebuild. People think it's all about exercise. Well, you've just exercised doing the game. So try and come off the exercise, especially the exercise that's going in your head. When you play a game, you're self-critical, so you're going over things. So relax with nice people, eat nice food, and be a nice guy.
Perfect. بنتكلم دلوقتي، سألنا عن أحسن طريقة إن إحنا ممكن نعمل ريكفري منها، أو اللي هو الاستشفاء يعني. في أي طريقة معينة؟ هو بيقول أهم حاجة إن أنت تريح عقلك، إن أنت يكون عقلك صافي وذهنك صافي، اخرج مع أصحابك، اتكلم في حاجة تانية، انسى الجيم خالص، لأن الانتنسيتي بتاعت الجيم أو السخونة بتاعت الجيم بتخليك أنت متوتر وممكن بتتصاب بدون أي شيء. فبيقول دلوقتي مثلا شفنا رونالدو، إن أنت طبعا لازم تنام كويس. بيقول شفنا رونالدو عنده شيف، بس في نفس الوقت بيروح المطعم وبيعمل كل حاجه يعني بيروح بياكل اكل بره كده عشان بس يصفي ذهنه وعشان يبقى مع الناس بره، يغير مزاجه يعني. Alright, so how can a player train for long sprints whilst at home? You know, during the lockdown, there's like you saw Chelsea players against Arsenal, for example. That was a good example. They were sprinting and then they got hamstring injuries. So how can we avoid that whilst we're training at home? We don't have this long distance to run.
It's very, very difficult. And the problem is that if the people who design football, that's the authorities who design football, don't give enough time for players to get in the right condition before they start having them on TV, playing in big games, then the people that run football are fools, absolute fools. And it's a disgrace. Because to be able to play at full level, like these players have to do, they have to have the development to get them back into shape after being locked in a room. It's crazy.
Perfect. سألناه دلوقتي بنقول له ازاي انت تتمرن على اللونج سبرنتس او السبرنتات الطويله، المسافات الطويله في الملعب وانت في البيت، يعني ده مستحيل. وشفنا طبعا لعيبه تشيلسي قدام ارسنال، اثنين منهم يعني اقوياء جدا مشهورين بالسبرنتات الطويله، ولكن جالهم عضل خلفيه. فهو بيقول دي حاجه صعبه جدا ومستحيل ان انت تتفاداها، وعشان كده القائمين على اللعبه لازم يدوا اللعيبه المساحه او الانديه المساحه الكافيه ان هم يتمرنوا في بيئه مناسبه في الملعب، ان انت تقدر توصل للياقه بتاعتك الطبيعيه وتقدر تعمل الكلام ده كله، والا النتيجه هتبقى زي ما شفنا كده مثلا بالنسبه لماتش ارسنال. بيقول هيبقى طبعا من الغباء ان احنا نعمل حاجه زي كده. For individuals or pool clubs, I thought we answered this question already, but if you want to go through again, you know, they don't have the recovery options that the new options that the rich clubs have now for recovery. So to do it at home, you said before, it's about relaxing your mind and sleeping, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing. اوكي، ده كان سؤال تاني بيقول ان احنا بالنسبه للناس اللي ما عندهمش الامكانيات زي مثلا انديه زي مانشستر يونايتد، ازاي يعملوا ريكفري في البيت او الكلام ده. هو راجل بيقول نفس الاجابه برضو، ان هو ريح عقلك، نام كويس، كل كويس، اشرب كويس. او طبعا هو كان في حاجه قالها فوق، ان هو موضوع نعمل سيركليشن في اليوم اللي بعده، نتمرن كويس عشان الدم يخرج كل الحاجات اللي موجوده، الزيادات اللي في العضل والكلام ده كله. How much water do I need to drink that helps my body to recover? I'm not sure if it's especially in home countries. And if I feel full, I can't drink. There's any alternative like food or fruits?
Well, I mean, I personally drink coconut water.
Coconut water.
You know, I think coconut water is a really fantastic aid to hydration. I also drink lemon water. You know, you can put some salts in, which can help you to rehydrate properly. I drink a lot of tea, you know, but it's green tea, and I put cinnamon and ginger in, you know, with the powdered stuff and everything that helps rehydrate. And you can easily go online and find them. Find different things until you find, oh, that's my stomach feels great now, and I can function properly. But it takes time. Nobody can say it's so much water. People are saying drink 7 liters of water a day. It's crazy, man. Absolutely crazy.
Can't take that.
No, exactly. So what you've got to do is try different methods and see what feels good to you. See, the day that you feel good, it's because I've done that. Well, I'll stick with that, and then perhaps, you know, change little bits here and there. But drinking loads of water can be a terrible thing to do, because you take a lot of nutrients out of your body by doing that.
سألناه دلوقتي بالنسبة لكمية الماء المفروض نشربها في اليوم، وهل يعني في كمية معينة، ولو أنا جسمي لو مش قادر أشرب إزاي أقدر أعمل الكلام ده كله، بالذات في الأوقات اللي هي البلاد الحر. فبيقول دلوقتي هو على نفسه بيشرب كوكونات ووتر، أو اللي هي المية اللي بالكوكونات يعني، وليمون ووتر، شاي بالسينامون والجينجر أو اللي هو الجنزبيل يعني. بيقول أي حاجة يعني، ممكن حاجات كتير على الإنترنت، كل الحاجات اللي تساعدك. بيقول الناس اللي بتشرب 7 لتر في اليوم والكلام ده جنان، وما تاخدش الكلام ده، جسمك يقدر يستحمل حاجة معينة، بس خلينا نحافظ عليها. For a very unique question for someone who's got slip disc, what exercise he needs? There's any specific thing?
He needs to go down to the doctor and make sure that he's not going to make it worse. I would not recommend anything for a slip disc unless I was personally coaching the guy. And no way would I give any exercise. Sorry.
That's right. نقول دلوقتي في شخص عنده انزلاق غضروفي، ايه التمارين المناسبه ليه؟ هو بيقول هيبقى من الجنان ان اي حد يدي لك نصيحه كده، لازم تروح تشوف الدكتور، الا لو انت حابب تروح تشوفه. لو هو شافك على الطبيعه هيقدر ينصحك، ولكن كل حاله مختلفه، فممكن يدي لك حاجه تزود مشكلتك، فبيقول لازم تروح للدكتور. The very last question here, what's your biggest achievement in the sports world, and who's the best players you have actually trained and you're proud of? And what's next for you? So it's a long question.
It's a long question, but a short answer. And I've actually wrote it out. My biggest achievement is to stay with a fresh, open mind, always thinking, watching, listening. When I see in the sports world that people getting a little success or having a certain qualification suddenly hold on to them things and chisel them into stone, and they become idols for them to worship. I have never worshipped anybody, not anything, except for understanding more and more that God will give to us. That's what you worship. God's gift to us to become wiser. Some of the players that I've worked with, and I wouldn't like to even start mentioning, obviously Cristiano's mentioned a lot because he's still at the top level after such a long time, and I was there with him in the early days. But, you know, there's so many, and obviously different sports as well. I've been really, really happy with the variety as well as the content, you know what I mean? The types of players. So I wouldn't like to mention names. You know, I've never counted how many cups or anything that United won while I was there. That doesn't mean anything to me. It's me doing my job, and I've been happy to work for Manchester United, the club I always supported as a kid. And now I'm still asked loads of questions, even though I've been gone there for nearly 9 years now. And people are still asking me about my relationship with Manchester United. And my son has actually taken over my job that I had for all them years at United under Ole Gunnar, who I had a great relationship with over the years. So I'm happy with what happened, but I wouldn't like to say a greatest achievement apart from getting that wisdom to keep learning and not thinking I know it all.
عارفين. سألناه دلوقتي بنقول له ايه اهم انجازاتك وايه اهم اللعيبه اللي انت مرنتهم وكده، فطبعا احنا عارفينهم يعني. فهو بيقول اهم انجازاته ان هو بيتعلم، بيشوف، بيبص، بيتفرج وبيتعلم. بيقول ما تنبهرش باي حد كده، لان كل الناس ممكن يحصل تاني وتالت، ولكن هو بيقول لازم نتعلم ونشوف الهدايا اللي ربنا مديها لنا، الجيفتس اللي ربنا مديها لنا، ونتعلم منها ونشوف نقدرها ونتعامل معاها صح. بيقول طبعا رونالدو وغيره لعيبه كتير وعظام ناس كتير بيتكلم عليهم، ولكن يعني بيقول هو اهم حاجه انت تشوف الحاجه نفسها مش الشخص، يعني انسى الشخص ولكن اتعلم واعرف اكتر. وبيقول هو ساب يونايتد من 9 سنين تقريبا، غالبا مع الفتره اللي مشي فيها سير أليكس فيرغسون، ولكن طبعا شفنا ابنه دلوقتي ماسك، هو ابنه الصغير ماسك مساعد سولشاير، هو دلوقتي علاقته جميله جدا بيه، هو المعد البدني بيهم وبيكمل الرحله. Sorry, last thing, I don't want to go before you mentioned something in a chat before about Paul Scholes and Ryan Giggs. Do you want to just highlight that if you don't mind?
Okay, yeah. So people go on, you know, you talk about the Toure business and saying he's big and strong and everything. Yes. Well, the player that I actually liked that got on with the best and rated the most was actually a guy who had no speed, no power, no strength, no endurance capacity compared with most of the players that he played with. But he played for England, he played for Manchester United for many years, and he was only a tiny guy called Paul Scholes. His skill level was ridiculous. And his ability to move and understand what was going on in the pitch was so incredible compared with everybody else's. He stood out to me, somebody who's took and got the most of the least. And that's why he's my favorite.
هو دلوقتي انا قلت له كنا احنا بنعمل شات في الاول، كان بيقول لي على ما بقول له على ادامه ترايوري وهو جسمه كبير وازاي بيعمل كده، قال انسى موضوع الجسم، اهم لعيب هو تقريبا مرنه ومن اهم اللعيبه اللي مرنهم في حياته هو لعيب كان جسمه قليل، مش قوي، مش سريع، مش ما عندوش اي حاجه من وصفات الناس بتدور عليها او المدربين بيدوروا عليها، ولكن هو كان لعيب عظيم جدا. هو بول سكولز لعب لمانشستر يونايتد، لعب لمنتخب انجلترا، كان من اهم اللعيبه في تاريخ الكوره عموما في نص الملعب. بيقول كان بيعمل حاجات عظيمه جدا بالكوره، بيتحرك كويس، بيقرا الجيم كويس، وهو بالنسبه له ده كان حاجه يعني اسطوريه. Mark, thank you very much for your time today. That was pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. Bye.